Imagine a world teetering on the edge of the familiar, a place where the fabric of the everyday begins to unravel, revealing glimpses of the extraordinary lurking beneath. You're about to embark on a journey into the enigmatic, where the peculiar and the perplexing intertwine, where every tale twists the mind and tugs at the spirit. It's a descent into the strange, the mysterious, and the unexplained. This is When Reality Frays. New episodes are published every Monday and Thursday, and When Reality Frays is available everywhere fine podcasts are found. Before we move on, please hit that follow or subscribe button and turn on all reminders so you're alerted when new episodes are released. Today's episode contains two stories. Up first is the Vostok station signal. It's a tale of an outpost at the bottom of the world that detects something that shouldn't be beneath the ice. And the second story of the day is the fog of Islamorada, a reminder that the sea holds things unknown that are better left alone. Now, let's get to the stories. Picture a fragile outpost of human ambition adrift in a frozen void. This is Vostok Station, a Soviet outpost perched on the edge of Antarctica's heart, where the ice is thicker than time itself. Here, a handful of scientists cling to reason, their radios tuned to the whispers of an ancient world. But tonight, the ice speaks back, not in tremors or static, but in a pulse, a signal from depths no man has touched, where secrets sleep in liquid dark. In this place, where the line between discovery and dread blurs, 9 souls are about to hear something originating in that place, where reality frays. This is the story of the Vostok station signal. The Antarctic night was a predator, its sharp claws of wind and cold tearing at Vostok Station. It's July 1989, the dead of Antarctic winter, and the polar darkness has swallowed the sun. The mercury is frozen at minus 53 degrees Celsius. 1,000 miles from the nearest human presence, Vostok Station clings to the East Antarctic ice sheet, its prefabricated modules buried beneath snowdrifts, trembling against gales that scream of ancient, unforgiving things. Inside, the air was a miasma of diesel fumes, cigarette smoke, and human desperation, the walls papered with frost that never thaws. 9 souls, scientists, technicians, and a mechanic, endured this frozen purgatory, their minds slowly unraveling in the absence of light or horizon. Beneath their boots, 4 kilometers of ice guarded Lake Vostok, a subglacial ocean sealed since the world was young, a secret Moscow coveted in its shadow war with the West. Nikolai Volkov, a geophysicist, sat hunched in the main lab, his eyes burning from nights without sleep. He was a veteran of Arctic blizzards and a survivor of bureaucratic purges. His knuckles were scarred from brawls and frostbite, his heart still wounded by the loss of his brother, who vanished a decade ago in a Siberian expedition for which the KGB erased all trace. Vostok was his exile, a chance to wrestle meaning from the ice's silence. His radio equipment, a labyrinth of dials and flickering tubes, hummed faintly, capturing the ice's seismic tremors and magnetic anomalies. At 02:17, the ice spoke. A crackle sliced through the silence, sharp as a blade, rhythmic as a pulse. Nikolai froze, his breath clouding in the lab's chill, his fingers hovering over the controls. He cautiously twisted a dial, expecting the fleeting glitch of an auroral static or a generator's hiccup. But the crackle held, growing into a cadence every 1.3 seconds, precise as a metronome. His pulse hammered, a primal warning he couldn't name. He switched on the spectrum analyzer, its screen igniting with a waveform that writhed like a living thing. peaks and troughs folding into a steady pattern too intricate and deliberate to be natural. This wasn't the ice's voice. This was something else. He signaled the others, his movements urgent. Alexandra Petrova, a glaciologist, slipped into the lab, her eyes sharp with ambition Vostok's monotony hadn't dulled. She'd clawed her way from Moscow's academic fringes, her thesis on subglacial lakes earning her this frozen prison. She hid behind a mask of calm, but her mind churned, sensing a discovery that could rewrite her name in history. Yuri the mechanic followed, his bulk filling the doorway. He was innately suspicious, his mistrust forged in Kazakhstan's oil fields where sabotage was a daily threat. Irina, the meteorologist, entered last, her movements anything but graceful from living in Vostok's relentless frozen darkness. The others, 2 technicians, a biologist and a cook, crowded in, their eyes widening in surprise as the signal pulsed through the speakers. Click. Hum. Click. Hum. A heartbeat from the deep. Nikolai worked the triangulation, glancing around at his comrades when he identified the signal was coming from more than 3 kilometers straight down, from beneath the ice, within Lake Vostok's liquid heart. The truth landed when he explained to the non-scientists that nothing could broadcast from that depth. Not seismic rumbles, not mineral sparks, not the Soviet drills stalled at 2 kilometers, their rigs no match for the ice's ancient armor. Alexandra's thoughts spiraled to Lake Vostok's isolation, its waters a time capsule from an era before mammals, but she recoiled from the idea of life. Nothing could survive in that abyss other than potentially single-celled organisms. Yuri's mind turned to espionage, to whispers of American submarines prowling Antarctic seas, their technology mocking Soviet pride. Irina clung to science, her thoughts grasping at auroral interference, but the magnetometers mocked her, their needles still. The signal grew louder, its rhythm a relentless intruder, seemingly filling the lab with a presence. Nikolai cycled the equipment, just in case. Once everything was restarted, the signal returned. Nikolai's mind wrestled with impossibilities. A gas pocket emitting electromagnetic bursts. A piezoelectric surge from crushed ice. The waveform's complexity defied any such notions, its repeating sequences a cipher that teased meaning without yielding it. He sent a response, a desperate Morse code ping, but the signal ignored him, its pulse unbroken. Alexandra studied the analyzer, her heart racing as she traced the waveform's fractal edges. The station's walls groaned, the wind outside a banshee tearing at the seams. Vostok was a fragile shell, its power lines buried under snow, its radio tower a lone finger against the void. Yuri paced, his boots scuffing the floor, his thoughts poisoned by Cold War betrayal. Had the Americans buried a device in the ice, a psychological weapon to fracture Soviet resolve? Nikolai dismissed it, the depth was too great. But doubt crept in, fed by Moscow's silence on NATO's Antarctic Games. Irina's hands shook as she checked the weather logs, praying for a natural cause, but the skies were empty, the aurora a distant ghost. The technicians, young and untested, exchanged glances, both feeling an undercurrent of fear. The biologist, a quiet man who studied microbes, stared at the floor, his thoughts drifting to what might be hiding in Lake Vostok's unseen depths. Hours passed, the lab's confines tightening, the walls pulsing with the signal's rhythm. Nikolai's thoughts returned to his brother, lost in Siberia's permafrost, a case sealed by men in gray coats. Was this signal another secret, one the ice would bury forever? Alexandra's scientific armor cracked, her imagination conjuring shapes in Lake Vostok's dark, fluid shadows with minds of their own. Irina's notes grew erratic, her pen scratching shapes that mirrored the waveform as if the signal was channeling through her. At the 8th hour, the station's lights flickered, though the generator purred steady. A vibration hummed through the floor, faint but undeniable, as if the ice was waking. Nikolai's heart pounded, his eyes locked on the analyzer as the signal's frequency climbed a slow, deliberate ascent, like a machine charging for release. Alexandra leaned closer, her breath shallow, sensing intent in the shift, a purpose that chilled her blood. At the 10th hour, the vibration intensified, a low thrum that rattled beakers and set teeth on edge. The waveform tightened, its pulses accelerating, a crescendo that screamed of finality. Nikolai grasped for an explanation, but the signal was a force, a will that dwarfed them. Alexandra's thoughts fractured, torn between awe and fright. Irina sank to her knees, her notes scattered, her mind and body numb. Then, at 14 hours and 29 minutes, it ended. The speakers went silent, the waveform flatlined, and a silence crashed over the lab, sharper than any sound. Nikolai stared at the analyzer, his chest heaving, willing the signal to return, but the screen was a void. Alexandra exhaled, her body trembling in the unsettling silence. Irina remained on the floor, her eyes vacant. Nikolai sent an encrypted signal to Moscow, the report laced with desperation, but the response was one ice-cold word: classified. That was the final communication. The Vostok station went radio silent, sounding alarms within the Kremlin and the Soviet Ministry of Defense. Paranoia loomed large, the Soviet government fearful that the signal's sudden appearance then disappearance, followed by silence from Vostok station, was an indication of an impending NATO attack. The alert level was raised, the nuclear-armed ICBMs requiring only moments to launch if the order was issued. Behind the scenes, Western diplomats scrambled to defuse the situation before the world was destroyed in atomic fire. On a war footing, the Kremlin dispatched troops to Antarctica to investigate the sudden silence from Vostok station. But it was the middle of winter on the bottom of the globe. Storms raged with near hurricane-force winds, and visibility was often measured in single digits. The first plane, heavily loaded with soldiers specially trained for Arctic environments, vanished somewhere over the ice shelf. Russian paranoia exploded, refusing to accept any possibility other than the U.S. and NATO were responsible. If not for the Cold War-era hotline, it is probable that the USSR would have launched its nuclear missiles against the United States and NATO countries in Europe. It was only through a heroic effort by American and British diplomats that the Soviets were pulled back from the brink of Armageddon. Negotiations were strained to the breaking point, but Russia was eventually convinced to accept NATO assistance. A joint NATO-Soviet team was assembled, and in early August 1989 departed Cape Town, South Africa. Vostok Station was more than 3,000 miles away, and with no runway, the long-haul plane, an American Hercules LC-130, couldn't land there. Putting down on an airstrip carved out of the ice at India's Maitree Station, the team transferred to an American-made Twin Otter with skis for landing gear. 16 hours later, after 2 refueling stops, the team landed at Vostok Station. The temperature was negative 75 degrees Celsius, or minus 103 Fahrenheit. Winds were steady at 40 miles per hour, gusts regularly reaching 70. For Vostok Station, this was just a normal winter day. None of the station's crew came out to meet them, and when they tried to enter the station, they found the hatches locked from the inside. Before they could force their way in, the team found the station's crew. They were seated in a large circle, 50 yards from the station's main entrance. Each was frozen solid, and the Russian colonel leading the expedition verified every crewman was accounted for. But if that was the case, who had secured the hatches, which could only be locked from the inside? The team forced a hatch open with high explosives. Inside, everything appeared normal. The diesel generator was running, providing heat and lights. There was no indication of violence and no explanation for why the entire crew seemingly committed mass suicide by freezing to death. Tensions between NATO and the USSR cooled after the team leaders communicated with their respective governments. A mutually agreed-upon explanation was formulated, blaming Antarctic psychosis brought on by months without sunlight, coupled with the high-stress environment of living and working in the most remote spot on the planet for months at a time. That was the official line. Unofficially, rumors swirled about an advanced ancient civilization miles beneath the ice. Others whispered about extraterrestrial bases for UFOs. In 2012, Vostok's drills finally reached Lake Vostok, finding no structures, no UFO bases, and nothing capable of emitting a radio signal. Yet rumors of something inner beneath the ice persist to this day. In the frozen silence of Vostok Station, 9 souls heard the heartbeat of something vast, something that spoke from a place where light and time had surrendered. Was it a cry from Lake Vostok's ancient depths, or merely a trick of minds stretched thin? In the vast alien world of Antarctica, those questions echo forever. If you're enjoying the stories, please consider supporting the research and production that go into bringing them to you by buying me a coffee. The link is in the episode show notes, and I would greatly appreciate your support. Now, on to today's second story, which is The Fog of Islamorada. In 2021, a Key West librarian uncovered a 19th century logbook in the archives describing a schooner lost near Islamorada in 1847. Its final entry was chilling, but easily passed off as superstitious fear. A fog came in, bringing lights and cries for help from the sea. During our search for the souls in peril, 4 of the crew have gone missing without explanation. Now, I fear for the safety of my remaining crew. The librarian checked the coordinates noted in the entry, finding them marked on nautical charts as a navigational hazard since 1929, their danger unspecified. But this story begins nearly 20 years earlier, in the summer of 2003. This is the story of the Islamorada fog. The Atlantic shimmered like liquid mercury under the August sun of 2003, its deceptive calm cloaking the Florida Keys in a haze of heat. 10 miles off Islamorada, the yacht Elysium drifted, a 40-foot speck floating on an endless sea. Its sleek hull gleamed, but no ripple trailed its wake, and no sign of life stirred its deck. A Coast Guard fast response boat approached, slicing through the glassy water. It had been summoned by a fisherman's report of the unresponsive vessel. The Elysium belonged to Robert Callahan, a 45-year-old Miami real estate magnate who had set sail 3 days prior with his brother Tom and friends Marcus Reed and Luis Navarro for a fishing trip. No distress signal had been received, and no storm had swept the area. Yet the yacht floated alone in the heart of the Bermuda Triangle. Lieutenant Elena Marquez, a 32-year-old officer in charge of the boat and small crew, stood at the Osprey's helm, her dark eyes scanning the horizon. Her crew, Petty Officer Jake Coogan and bosun's mate Diego Lopez, moved with practiced efficiency, but a subtle tension hung in the air. The Bermuda Triangle, that cursed expanse between Miami, Bermuda, and San Juan, was a specter no sailor named lightly. Over a century, it had claimed more than 1,000 lives, ships and planes swallowed without a trace. Marquez pushed the thought aside, focusing on protocol as they drew alongside the Elysium. The boarding was routine, though eerily quiet. The yacht's deck was a still life. fishing rods in their holders, and a cooler brimming with unopened bottles of beer. A half-eaten sandwich sat on the table. Emergency flares were in place, none of them used, and several life jackets along with an emergency inflatable raft were properly stowed. The scene carried the faint tang of sunscreen and salt, but no hint of struggle or haste. Below deck, the cabin was pristine. Bunks were made, charts folded, a radio turned on and perfectly functional. Jake checked the engine room, his flashlight revealing only well-maintained equipment. Then he checked the GPS. Its screen displayed a puzzling detail. For 48 hours, the Elysium had moved in a perfectly circular path, a loop of 1.2 nautical miles, despite no crew to steer it. In the captain's quarters, Marquez found the logbook, its leather cover worn but intact, open to a final entry dated August 9th, 3 a.m. Robert Callahan's handwriting was meticulous until the last line. A fog is trailing us. There's lights in the mist. It knows our names. The sentence broke off, a jagged smear of ink trailing across the page as if the pen had been wrenched away. Marquez frowned, then continued her inspection. On the bridge, the compass on the dash spun lazily, its needle refusing to settle, though the yacht was still. This drew a deeper frown, and she rapped sharply on the instrument with a knuckle, but that did nothing to stop the odd behavior. Marquez called for a tow to take the abandoned vessel to Key West. As they returned to their boat, a shadow flickered across the Elysium's deck, tall, fluid, and wrong, its edges dissolving into the sun's glare. Everyone saw it, their eyes going wide in surprise, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, leaving them questioning if they had really seen something or not. Jake dismissed it as the shadow of a seabird, exaggerated by the humidity haze. Marquez and Lopez traded a quick look, but didn't argue his theory. The search and rescue operation continued, unraveling into a labyrinth of dead ends. Air and sea searches scoured 1,000 square miles of the Gulf, finding no life jackets, no debris, and no bodies. Rumors about the Bermuda Triangle being responsible for the men disappearing began to spread, but the Coast Guard's area commander, Captain Hargrove, dismissed them, demanding facts over folklore. But facts were scarce. The Elysium's radio logs showed no outgoing calls. Its satellite phone was untouched. Weather reports confirmed clear skies and calm seas for the past week. Friends and families were interviewed, confirming none of the missing men had been suicidal. Marquez followed a lead to the Rusty Anchor, a Key West bar where Callahan's group had spent their final night. The bartender, Eddie, told her that the group had spent the evening listening to tales from an old man who claimed to be a retired sailor. He had told sea stories in exchange for Callahan paying for his drinks, and had ended the night with a warning about a fog that would take men right off their boats without a trace. Eddie said the men were amused by the warning and left the bar soon after the old sailor. The Elysium's compass was sent to a naval lab in Norfolk. They reported back that the compass was one of the best quality units on the market and showed no indication of tampering or physical damage. And they determined that the magnetic element inside the compass was demagnetized. The report included a couple of possible explanations for how that could have happened, which included exposure to very powerful electromagnetic fields or temperature extremes. Neither of those scenarios were realistic based on what investigators knew. With no viable leads left to explore, the Coast Guard closed the case, using the presence of the ice chest full of beer to justify their assertion that drinking had led to one man falling overboard, the other two jumping in the water to rescue him. Unfortunately, they had likely been pulled away from the boat by a current and soon drowned. The finding fit all the facts as long as the compass wasn't factored in, and the incident was forgotten. 11 years later, March 2014, a recreational diver discovered a gold Rolex near the center of the 1.2-mile loop the Elysium had followed before the Coast Guard found it. Its back was engraved with RC for Robert Callahan, and the Coast Guard confirmed with his family that he did in fact have such a watch. It had stopped at 3:02 a.m., matching the logbook's final mysterious entry about being pursued by a fog. The Florida Keys began to whisper of the Elysium. Fishermen reported laughter drifting across the water at night, always from the direction of the empty sea. Miguel Torres, a fishing guide, claimed to have seen 3 men in the water without life jackets or any boat within radar range. They called to him, begging him to come closer. He turned to tear open a locker that held flotation rings to toss to the men, but they were gone when he turned back. Charter captains began shunning the area. In 2015, marine biologist Lena Chen, studying reef decay near the site where the Elysium had been found, recorded an underwater sound, a rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat. She claimed that an unnatural fog then rolled in, completely enveloping her boat. With tears in her eyes, she claimed she then heard men's voices, crying out for help, but she was unable to locate them in the fog, and when it cleared, they fell silent. By 2017, the stories had drawn paranormal investigators, their boats laden with microphones, EMF detectors, and infrared cameras. One team, led by a former college professor named Daniel Holt, ventured to the coordinates, chasing whispers of the supernatural. Days later, their vessel was found drifting in the same circular pattern as Elysium. The crew was shaken but alive. Their engine had gone out, and they were engulfed by a fog that came out of nowhere. They claimed to have heard screams in the fog, but all of their electronic gear had stopped working. A Coast Guard Marine mechanic inspected the boat's engine and determined the fuel injection system's ECM, or electronic control module, had failed, and the boat's compass had been demagnetized, the same as the Elysium's. The Elysium was auctioned in 2019. Its new owner, a Tampa retiree named Harold Vance, drawn by its low price. Within a year, unable to sleep aboard, claiming he was tormented by nightmares of a fog from which came cries for help, he changed its name and sold it. The Elysium drifts on, its story etched into the whispers of fishermen and the charts of wary sailors. Were Robert Callahan and his companions victims of accident, as the Coast Guard claims? Or does something wait patiently in the depths of the Bermuda Triangle for unwary travelers to enter its realm? The stories presented are inspired by true events. Names may have been changed for privacy reasons. New episodes of When Reality Frays are uploaded every Monday and Thursday. If you're enjoying the journey into the strange, the mysterious, and the unexplained, be sure to press that follow or subscribe button and turn on all reminders so you're alerted whenever an episode drops. Until next time, thank you for listening to When Reality Frays.